After many years of failure, countries are coming together to finally address the dangers posed by North Korea. We must be tough and decisive. What's he talking about? Joining us right now, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley.
Former governor of the great state of South Carolina.
Absolutely.
So proud of you and your career.
Thank you so much.
So what do you make of the president's tweet?
Well, you know, I think Saturday was a huge win for the United States. It was a huge win for the United Nations. It was not a good day for North Korea. And basically what you saw was all the countries come together and say, this has got to stop. This is not something that we think can be reckless and just casually dealt with, and that's what he's done. And I think they hit him, and basically we hit him hard.
Yeah. Did something happen? Did they do something that even pressed the buttons of Russia and China that made it easier for you to convince them to go along with this?
No, it was really me saying how many more ICBM tests do we need to have before we do something.
Good.
And at what point are we going to show action? And really, that goes back to what we've tried to do at the United Nations, which is stop talking about it. Let's get something done. And so last Monday, I basically told the Security Council, we've talked enough. It's time to get this done. And look, yes, China and Russia were not the easiest, but at the end of the day, they came through, and that's all that matters.
Good for you. 15-0. That's awesome. Tell us about what's our plan if the sanctions don't work? Because North Korea, it seems like they're not working after his response.
Well, first of all, on Saturday during the vote, we did say this is not the solution to North Korea. What this does do is this kicks him in the gut. This goes right after the hard currency. He's going to feel it, and all that money that he's been using for his ballistic missile program, you know, and he's not feeding his people, it just got reduced in a big way. What we are saying is now the ball's in your court. Kim now has to decide, is he going to turn around and say, okay, the international community is telling me to stop, or is he going to have, you know, a temper tantrum and go and respond?
Well, it sounds like he's having a temper tantrum because of the sanctions. He is now saying through state-run television, we will mobilize all resources and take physical action. It sounds like we are getting closer to a shooting war.
But we don't run scared. This had to happen. We had to go after his hard currency. We had to stop him. How he responds, he's going to now have to think, what's the end game? Is he really going to come after the United States knowing what the United States can do back? He's got to make that calculation. He now has to decide that. And I think what the United States does is we continue to know what our options are, and we continue to be able to
What
prepare.
are our options? If the sanctions aren't working, is it just to put ground troops? Is it what's the next step?
I think it depends on what he does. You know, so if he goes and he still tests small things, he's going to watch his hard currency go way down. He's going to start to see some real kicks when it comes to his ballistic missile program. If he chooses to do something more dangerous, the United States will respond accordingly. And I think the international community will respond
One thing you didn't do, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is you did not sanction Chinese banks that deal with North Korea. Would that be the next step?
So what we did do is we sanctioned one of the primary banks that North Korea deals with, and that was a hard-hitting bank that we did do. So we went after coal, lead, iron, seafood. We went after sanction designations, including the bank, and then we went a step further. No new laborers, which they make a lot of money, no new laborers leaving North Korea. And then we also went after joint ventures, no joint ventures. So this is pretty comprehensive.
They make $500 million off that joint labor. Now, would another step be oil? Because if you stop China from selling oil to North Korea, what would that do?
Yes, of course. Oil would really kick hard.
But right now they're getting their oil.
They're getting it, but we just cut $1 billion out of a $3 billion export. I mean, a third of their hard currency is being hit. They're going to feel this, and they're going to feel it in a big way. What was better was China came out and said to the international community, we're going to follow through on these sanctions, and we want everyone else to do it as well. It's a new tone coming from China. It's a new reaction coming from China.
How did you get China and Russia to come on board?
I think that with China, we basically said enough talk. We're done, and you have the ability to control 90% of their trade, and you can't make excuses anymore. To their credit, they stepped up. We did some heavy negotiations. We got them there. Russia, I think they wanted to delay it initially. I don't think that's what they wanted, but we got them there.
Right.
And as long as they were there, that's what matters.
Ambassador, on the front page of FoxNews.com right now, there is a story that apparently the intel community has picked up. Anti-ship cruise missiles were being loaded onto a patrol boat or patrol boats in North Korea. What can you tell us about that?
I can't. I can't talk about anything that's classified, and if that's in the newspaper, that's a shame. But I'll just
You have no
keep
reason
that
to believe that's not accurate, though.
I have no reason to comment on that.
That shouldn't be in the newspaper. Is that another leak, I guess?
You know, it's one of these things. I don't know what's going on, but I will tell you it's incredibly dangerous when things get out into the press like that. You're not only just getting a scoop on something, you're playing with people's lives.
Yes.
And this has got to stop. Whatever the leaks are coming from, if somebody thinks they're getting power or fame from it, all you're doing is putting Americans in
Sure,
danger.
and I understand that, but at the same time, is the United States intel community saying, hey, Mr. Kim, we're watching you. We just saw you put those things on the boat.
Well, listen, don't think that he's not aware and we're not aware of everything that's happening at every given moment. We know exactly what's going on.
We know the president last week was going to come out, rumored to come out and go against China and their trade practices. And that's not really your concern. But the fact is, if that speech was held back and action was held back in order to get China's vote, that would be significant. Was there some coordination on that you know of?
A lot of what our negotiations were just trying to get them to the finish line and getting them to save face as well and say, yes, we're doing our part. The United States is going to have further conversations, and I had further conversations with my Chinese counterparts that we are not going to agree on everything. We are going to have issues on other things, and when those happen, we'll talk about it. But this was about the resolution. This was about us coming together. This was about us working with China, and we did that.
And your experience being the ambassador now for a little more than 6 months, what is the biggest issue facing our country? Is it North Korea?
Right now, I think it's North Korea, but I think the other part is just the lack of stability around the world. Whether you look at Syria, whether you look at the issues in Africa, whether you look at Venezuela and the Philippines, you can't take your eye off of any part of the world right now, and the U.S. needs to lead in every single one of them. And that doesn't mean military action, but it means having a loud voice.
Some say we're not. They say we are not leading in these actions. What is Ambassador Haley? How do you view it as you sit the United Nations?
I think we just passed one of the strongest resolutions in a generation against North Korea. I think if you look at Syria, I think we basically put Assad in his place when he used chemical weapons, and we're continuing to work with all of the parties there to bring stability. I'm going to Africa in October to make sure that we're continuing to build our Africa policy, to work on the famine, the political issues, the terrorism. So we are anywhere and everywhere, which is what the United States does. When we lead, people follow.
You know who agrees with you regarding Syria? That would be the Washington Post. They had a headline in the last couple of days. It says, under Trump, gains against ISIS have dramatically accelerated. That's what we want to hear.
It's amazing. I mean, if you look at where we were with ISIS in January and you look at where we are today, it's a huge accomplishment. And I think, looking at the Security Council resolution on Saturday, looking just, as a governor at the stock market and jobs and everything else, we're seeing great actions taken by the administration. And I think you're seeing great teamwork. It's only just the beginning. I
just find it hard. You have to look long and hard to find somebody who has a negative review of your job performance over the last 6 to 7 months. I think there's certainly somebody happy in New Jersey right now.
Well, it's survival mode, so we're taking it a day at a time, but we've got a good team over at the USUN.
Okay.
All right. Governor, Ambassador.
Nikki.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.